Hello, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. We're just going to sit here for a few seconds and make sure that everything's starting. Give people time to sign in, get their bearings, get ready. And then I'm gonna read us some poems. So my name is Elizabeth Deanna Morris Lakes. I'm in my new king-size bed that I got as a birthday present for myself, which is why if it looks big, it's because it is big. I'm also here with the minstrel, who I have to move because he's no longer centered, because I used to have a queen-sized bed, and he was centered over that. The minstrel is a weird wall-hanging thing. It looks like he's made out of wood, but he's not. He's made out of like some sort of hard plastic. And he hung over my grandparents' bed for my whole youth. And when I was about 17, my brother called me. My grandfather lived across the street. He said, "Grandfather's getting rid of the minstrel." And I said, "What?" He said, "I'm assuming you want him." And I said, "That is correct. I would like the minstrel, please." And he's hung above my bed ever since. Even in college, he hung over my bed. I love the minstrel. So I'm going to give us a few more minutes to let some people get here. So I'll tell you about my poems. So this evening, I'm going to be reading from my book, Ashley Sugarnotch and the Wolf. Came out from Mason Jar Press in April of this year. And it's about two characters, the titular Ashley Sugarnotch and the titular Wolf. Ashley Sugarnotch is a woman. She's white. She is in her like mid to late 20s, and she has a lot of trauma in her life. Her father murdered her mother, and when she was about to go to college when she was 18, so she considers herself an orphan and feels very stuck in the grief about that trauma. And then there's the wolf, and the wolf is a human man, also white, who works in the same office building as Ashley, and he becomes obsessed with her. And the poems are about cycles of violence. And in waking life, the wolf is a human man, but at night they start dreaming about each other, and he's a wolf. So also to give yourself some context, Ashley's poems are all prose poems. I made this decision because I felt like Ashley is so controlled in every other part of her life that when she's thinking, it's just very stream of consciousness. And then the wolf's poems are all either in form or they're in syllabics. And that's because the wolf is doing everything he can to hold it together and not be violent. So, really quick before I actually start the reading, if somebody could comment, if you're just a hi, to see if I can see the comments. And if I can, then I will be fine. And if not, then I will make sure to message my host person to let them know that they need to text them to me. So I hope you have a very cozy evening with me here. I'm going to be reading a handful of poems. Oh, there's a person. Hello, Erica. Thank you so much. Now I know that you can both hear me and that and that I can see the comments. I'm going to read some poems, and then we're going to have a Q&A where I can answer questions. I will say that, it would be great if I had questions already sitting in the comments for me to answer. And if not, then I can talk for a little bit. But I usually don't. Let me take this back. I get very nervous during real Q&As because I worry that somebody will ask a question that's not actually a question and just goes on for too long. So I always like to have a question that I've written down ahead of time that I can just read that I know will be short. My point being, if you do have a question, feel free to formulate it and send it mid-reading. I won't mind. I can see it and I can deal with it then. It won't be a distraction. So I'm going to start with a poem. This is the first Ashley poem in the book. It's called Ashley Sugarnotch and the Big Red Bow. I just hate how thin and toned my legs are. My arm and leg hairs are so light I barely even have to shave. Can't my body be a little lopsided? One leg shorter than the other? I saw a young girl at the mall with these shoes, one wedge and the other flat. It compensated. I want to need to compensate. An old friend was born with two thumbs on one hand. Her parents cut one off, a shame for sure. But with the one she had left, L-shaped, she could smash anyone in thumb wrestling. She called it the sledgehammer. My fingers? Even in winter, the cuticles don't tear, even chewing them. Maybe I wouldn't mind looking so lovely and framed if I had something like heart surgery and a scar I could show off with strapless dresses. We weren't rich growing up. We were comfortable. If I had needed the surgery or those shoes, we could have afforded it. This isn't so ridiculous, what I'm asking. My mother and father smoked cigars occasionally, had a glass of wine with friends. But these points of decay don't interest me. I'm not interested in some death film only visible when my body is pieced apart during autopsy. Even my ears are the same shape. Maybe something will just happen, Some sort of accident or mishap. My father lost a chunk of ear during a war or something similar. He would always touch toward the blank space at the dinner table to remind us of something we couldn't know. But this was before. I am trying to know the things I can't. For Halloween, I wore my green swimsuit bottoms and a big red bow tied around my chest, a new car and a new car model. Everyone asked what I was. When I told them a present to be presented, they tugged at the bow end and looked past my eyes. So this is called The Wolf and the Cup of Tea. This. The first time that I saw you, Ashley. In my chair at my desk, I can see right into the break room. Your first day you came down for coffee, but the carafe? Empty. Instead, you pulled the hot water spigot on the coffee maker and filled your mug with the steamy, sputtering flow. When you placed the tea bag in, you let your fingertips sink in too. I counted to 10 before you drew them out. The look on your face. Relief. Jaw slackened, cheeks flushed. I knew I loved you then, loved every last sweet cranny. You knew hate is defined as spitting out each other's mouths. You knew pleasure in sucking one's raw fingers, which you did as you left the moment, returned back to the moments of others. That night, I plunged my whole hand into hot tea and dreamt you licked every last finger. This is called Ashley Sugarnotch is Not Interested in Love. I am not interested in love. I always laugh when I read that line. It's not supposed to be funny. I am not interested in love. Today I saw a wolf that had been hit by a car, but it looked like it had been eaten by a car. The blood looked like a giant bow on a brand new vehicle, except it was tying the road closed. See, that's way more interesting than hearing an anecdote about how I tenderly, under many blankets, held hands last night with someone I had very much wanted to hold hands with for a very long time. Which in actuality, I did not. Instead, last night, I watched a documentary on giant squid. Giant squid have teeth-rimmed suckers, hundreds of tiny crowns. I thought about holding hands with the squid under the water, no scuba suit required. The water on our hands blossoming into roses. I am not interested in pursuit. in making memories. I saw a movie once where two people licked each other's faces and then cut slivers off the other's legs. In the end, they turned into whales. It was supposed to be a movie representing marriage, but those two people from the movie got divorced. And now that I know that, I want to watch it backwards to undo it. That's what I want. My body undone, untransformed. So this is called The Wolf, the Bird, and the Burrs. And I have not read this poem at a reading yet, so all of you are very lucky. The Wolf, the Bird, and the Burrs. While waiting for you today, Ashley, by the river, I saw a movement in the brush along the shore. As I moved closer, I noticed flapping. A bird was caught in burrs, its feathers so close to the plant stem. Did you know that burrs inspired Velcro? But Velcro is tamed compared to the hooks that bite into skin and fur, that rip away when pulled. The bird battled. Had it simply landed, tried to rest, I couldn't bear its struggle. I tried to unhook its wings from the trap to give another chance to fly. The bird pecked at my hands. I bled. Once freed, the bird couldn't move well. It foundered in the dust. Had it always been broken, or had I snapped some essential hollow bone? The bird cried from the ground. I pressed my foot on its head. Cracked. This wasn't what I intended, Ashley. I wanted to set it free. Instead, I ended its suffering. A gift or what? So I said that most of the wolf poems are in syllabics, and that's true. This is not. This is the exception. It's a sestina, which I love, sestinas. The wolf attempts to explain himself. I just want this all to stop now, to go away, Ashley. The feeling that saturates my skin at night, like my skeleton is pulling away from my flesh, just like it's new and implanted, but rejecting my body. An infection. I want to be whole and composed, to last through the night without shoving my hand in the hot water or numbing my face with ice. The water running down my neck. How do I stop this, Ashley? My hands are full of static I can't squeeze out. The last thing I want is to find you in my dreams tonight and crack open your ribs and rid your body of its organs. Is it so unreasonable to want a justice for myself? A new ending where I justify I'm not a wolf, inevitable. Finding you in the water of the river and holding you down, your body putting up a fight, because that's human, Ashley. It's human to fight against what we want at night when the exhaustion wears through the last set of reserve and control. I wonder when my last guard will shatter and I'll become just less than human. The other. Unrecognizable at night and willing to be held in straits beneath the water until I can no longer breathe. It's so easy, Ashley, for them to see you as less than a body and certainly not a soul. They won't see my body full of electricity and my hands and fists trying to last against the jerking muscles and teeth bitten on my tongue. Ashley, you know I never want to hurt you in the dreams. I just lose myself when covered in fur. I'd rather bathe you in water, cool and blessed. I'd rather find you like a lover in the night and curl at your feet. A good dog. And in this tender night, we'd know that though our dreams might be bad, our bodies would be still. I'd wash you clean with river water in the morning, and our restfulness would last through the day. But if I get too close, I might just forget these hands are mine, Ashley. Ashley, will either of us make it through the night just long enough to see the sun's body rise one last time over the river's sparkling water? Ashley Sugarnotch feels awful. It's inappropriate to take naps at my desk. That's what my boss told me. I've been having trouble sleeping. I've searched the hell out of what to do. I cover all electric lights. I breathe in 8 counts. I soak lavender buds in hot water and sip the resulting tea as I read a light article on gardening or cooking. Nothing apt to turn the knob on my adrenaline or heartbeat. Still, I lie and wait. Even through the pulled curtains, lights from pacing cars race by like fingers pushing across the ceiling. At 3, when the cars calm down and even the crickets and cicadas begin to hush, I go outside and walk. I walk in the grass, along the sidewalk, along the road. I walk until the stars begin to blur as my eyes water, until my legs tingle with their understanding of gravity. By now, it's 5 o'clock in the morning. My body will know nothing but rest. I make my way inside and fall onto the floor. I sleep. And immediately, I dream of the rotting forest, the bald dirt hills, the pile of bricks where a house used to be. I don't even bother to run anymore. I sink, maybe hoping to fall asleep here, too, to wake up in some slightly calmer, slightly less decayed dreamscape. But I don't. The wolf comes. Sometimes more dirt than fur. With delicate teeth, he bites my shoulder and pulls back the skin. The pain feels like electricity, both hot and cold, and muscles jerking alive and wholly, thickly dead. And so the wolf undresses me, one layer at a time, until I gasp and find myself with no lungs. And when I try again, my lungs fill. I am in the living room, crumpled on the carpet, itchy with sweat. What is one to do when left with pain like that? At the cafe near me, they have a drink called the Shaky. It's not on the menu anymore, but I started ordering it. 6 shots of espresso, topped off with dark roasted coffee. My muscles vibrate after these, alive and shuddering in some way that is separate from myself. But then, they move. Then they find their way to my desk, my work, the emails and meetings. But the wolf, I feel him waiting beneath the surface, waiting to strip me into pieces and call me his. So I have one more wolf poem, and then I have a happy poem because these are sad, and for another reason, which I'll describe when I get to it. The Wolf, a Shadow Manifested. Oh, side note. So this poem owes a huge debt to the Me Without You song, Wolf Am I and Shadow, which is on their album Brother Sister, which came out 14 years ago yesterday. And if there was not the end of the world, I would have gone to see them play through that album on Friday, which was also my birthday. But instead, this is what we're doing. This is it. This is where we are. But I always like to bring that up because that song's really beautiful, and I want people to listen to it. The Wolf, a Shadow Manifested. I died on a ship last night in my dream. The ship had sunk. I was in the only unsunk room. Suppose that I didn't actually die last night. I had knowledge of the end. Aren't I already dead? Eventually, I'll slip. Feel your life draining over my hands. I am waiting in the shadows, or rather, I am shadow waiting to transform to action or mass. Do I fail at being human? Or by fighting myself, am I more human after all? I know this sounds so rational, Ashley. I can be rational when you aren't near. If I die, who wins? I know you do not want this, Ashley, but that doesn't mean someone else wouldn't find you. I'm not just any shadow. I'm yours. I'm beside you in the darkness, but even more so in the light. So that's it from my book, Ashley Sugarnotch the Wolf. So I have a chapbook of poems I'm trying to get published called Each Other Crush Poems. And it's a loose crown of sonnets about like the moments where something could happen in like a relationship, like little moments of intimacy and excitement. But it ends with one love poem, and that's a poem that I wrote for Kenny, my husband, my love light. Um, and so I'm going to read that, and then I'll have questions. So if you have questions, you can start tippity tapping away at them now. But I promised Kenny that on this book tour, I mean, not that I told him this and he was like, okay. He wasn't like, okay. He was like, that's very nice. But it wasn't like he asked me to do this or something. I promised him that I would read this poem at the end of every reading to prove my devotion to him. So that's what I'm doing. Also, it's a good palate cleanser. But it's not titled. It's just part of the crown. So it's just for Kenny. I wondered what you could keep in the empty nest on your chin, but I should have known the answer was my hands, how easily they slid between the cinnamon red whiskers to hold your face. There was a day, with all of them, when I realized their absence was okay. I'll never not need you. I talk too much, and you gather the strings of words like ticker tape, roll them into balls to knit into more useful things. I hope I'm your most useful thing. I promise you can always find me in the humid breeze, in green, in our kids' eyes. I know if we are ever split, I'll find strands of your beard in unexpected places. A long closed book, my underwear drawer, my mouth, until I find it with my hands again. I'm assuming that's what you're all doing right now. So yes, if you have questions, please feel free to send them and I'll answer them. Otherwise, I'll just talk myself. I see we do have one that came in. So Sarah Clark says, wow, these poems are so intense. Yes, they are. Can you talk more about how you get into the space to do persona work? Yeah, and it's funny because I feel like persona is not a word that came up when I was writing these poems, and then it did later, and I was like, oh yeah, that's what they are. Um, I have always joked that I am a fiction writer that was rejected by the fiction writers, so I went to write poetry, and I'm just kind of always incognito. I'm really interested in characters, and I'm really interested in poems that are from a really specific voice. When I started writing these poems, I started because there's a sign for an exit just south of Wilkes-Barre for the towns Ashley and Sugarnotch. I remember seeing that name and thinking, "Oh, I need to write about Ashley Sugarnotch. That's like a great name." Um, but also in my head, I remember thinking that Ashley Sugarnotch was probably pretty unlikable. And you heard the first poem of hers, which Ashley Sugarnotch is a Red Bow, and she's not super likable to begin with. She's like, ugh, why aren't I uglier? And everyone's like, and you can just imagine everyone being like, what do you mean? You're complaining about being conventionally beautiful? Um, but I just sort of knew that I wanted to write about this unlikable character. And then as I started writing more of those poems, I realized that she was unlikable because she didn't really have the words to describe the grief that she was experiencing and the trauma that she had experienced. So I have a poem later in the book called Trisha, and my 8th grade English teacher messaged me about this on Twitter today. He was like, "Is that Trisha about Trisha Edelman?" And yes, it is. Trisha Edelman is somebody that I went to elementary school and middle school with, and she was murdered by her ex-boyfriend, who was the father of her first child, when she was pregnant with her second child with her current boyfriend. And she had a daughter already, and that daughter is essentially orphaned now because her father is in prison. and her mother is dead. And that was not the first story of that I had heard. The first one that I had heard was about, if you might remember, it was called the Facebook murder, where a dude murdered his wife and posted about it on Facebook. And again, they had a daughter, and their daughter was in the house when it happened. And there was a third story, and I can't even remember it. Like that's what I mean. Like, I kept seeing the same story happen over and over again. And so I was writing about this particular character, and then I was like, but what about the person that commits this violence? And I didn't want us to necessarily empathize with that person, but I wanted to look at that person before anything had happened. Because I think that with things like call out culture and Me Too, I think that those things are all super, super important. But I think that the next step is going to be, how can we cut somebody off before they do something really terrible, right? How can we see a behavior that might turn incredibly violent and get that behavior to stop? Because both Ashley and the wolf are failed by society. That's why they're mythic. That's why they're a folktale. Because they can't break out of this very regular cycle. And so after I had written the poems, to answer then your question about the persona part itself, I knew that these characters had two very, very different voices. And so I practiced reading them out loud the way that I imagined they would sound, knowing that one character I thought would sound annoying and the other one would sound like a wolf. But I think I just also spent so much time with these characters that I knew exactly how they would sound and how they would talk. And so that's how I was able. It took me 10 years to write this book. If I didn't, get into that very slowly over time, then I would have probably not published the book, because it probably wouldn't be very good. Okay, so another question. Who are your biggest influences, or who have you been reading lately? Okay, so my biggest influences, so my favorite living poet is Brian Henry. My favorite not living poet is Audre Lorde. I am really interested in writers that are writing something that aren't exactly one thing or another. So I also really like Sabrina Ora Mark. Let's see, whom else? I really like, for example, Carmen Maria Machado's In the Dream House, which is a memoir, but that is doing something really weird formally with how each section is only a few pages long and then is like in a different genre, essentially, like ranging from like romance to whatever else, like romance, choose your own adventure, horror. Um, and I also really like works that look interesting on the page. So like Claudia Rankine is always doing these things that are interesting on the page and interesting to look at, and sort of functioning in their own mode that, you could maybe find something else that looks sort of like it, but there's not really anything else like it. Yeah, I think that those are my biggest influences. Um, and then also I do really like um, being able to read something and find traces of other things in it. So like, again, to bring up Carmen Maria Machado, in The Husband Stitch by her, which is this like horrifying story, there's like so many different influences, both formally and then also contextually. Um, and she just can synthesize them into its own thing. And that's what I hope to do. I hope that I can just synthesize it into my own thing. So, thank you all so much for coming to my reading tonight. I hope you have a really good night. And if you want my book, you can go to masonjarpress.com and get it there. If you have any other questions, feel free to find me on Twitter. I'm at exclamate_. And I hope that you guys have a very cozy evening as well. You can say goodbye to the minstrel.